It's 8 o'clock. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Beyond Medicine. Those of you who are new to our Marvelous Medicine series, we do a program every week between 8 to 9:30 p.m. on Thursdays, covering different aspects of medicine, from cutting-edge technology to soft skills to team building, burnout, all kinds of things. And then we decided that at least once a month we should focus on something other than medicine. So we call those episodes as Beyond Medicine, and we do them on the last Thursday of every month. Usually we are have a doctor who's the speaker talking about non-medical interests, whether it be music or dance or painting or architecture or mountain climbing or whatever. So this time we have made an exception, and our speaker is a non-doctor. It is my proud privilege to introduce Professor Arun Menon. He's a professor of structural engineering at IIT Madras. Dr. Arun did his Bachelor of Architecture from REC Trichy, MTech in Civil Engineering from IIT Madras, and a Master's and PhD in Earthquake Engineering from the University of Pavia, Italy. His research interests are in structural aspects of historical constructions, earthquake behavior of historical masonry structures, earthquake resistant structural masonry, and earthquake risk assessment. He currently coordinates the activities of the National Center for Safety of Heritage Structures, which is a research center at IIT Madras. Dr. Arun Menon is a member of the expert advisory group to International Conservation Committee for Wat Phau UNESCO World Heritage Site at Laos, and he was also an expert member on the International Coordinating Committee for the UNESCO World Heritage Site of Bagan, Myanmar. Currently, he is involved in conservation projects in India, including Rashtrapati Bhavan, IIM Ahmedabad, Madurai Meenakshi Temple, Konark Sun Temple, and projects in Bhutan, Myanmar, and Philippines. The conservation project for Abad Saheshwara Temple, Tukachi in Tamil Nadu, received the UNESCO Asia Pacific Award of Distinction in 2024. I'm extremely thankful to Dr. Ravi Shankar for reaching out to Professor Arun Menon and to him for readily agreeing to give this talk. Welcome to the Marvelous Medicine family, Professor Arun Menon.
Very good evening to everybody. A real privilege to be here, and I qualify as a building doctor, not as a medical doctor, and this is beyond medicine, but medicine for buildings. So I hope you'll definitely be able to relate to the subject, also because we're talking of historical monuments in our country. So I'm at the outset very grateful for this invite, and I hope the few tens of minutes that I'll spend with you will be of interest and not bore you.
Before you start your actual presentation, let me give a quick introduction of the other moderators for the session.
Please. I'm done. I'll just share my screen and wait for you. Thank you.
Dr. Shivram Bharadwaj is a consultant plastic surgeon at Apollo Hospitals and an honorary consultant plastic surgeon for the Railway Hospital, Chennai. Dr. Shivram did his MBBS from Madras Medical College, DNB surgery and DNB surgery in India, and then went on to do his FRCS in Edinburgh and completed the formalities for FRCS in plastic surgery also in the United Kingdom. His non-medical interests include philosophy, evolutionary biology, and classical music, and he is training in vocal. He writes and talks about temple architecture and iconography, and he has been a speaker on Marvelous Medicine speaking about temple architecture, which generated so much interest that this topic on temple conservation became a natural fallout. Thank you, Dr. Shivram Bharadwaj, for being part of our Marvelous Medicine and Beyond Medicine journey.
Thank you very much.
Joining us will be Kanmani, who's an independent consultant working on architectural design, interior design, and renovations. She did her Bachelor of Architecture from the MEASI Academy of Architecture in Anna University, Chennai. She has worked with a conservation architect, restoring ancestral home and a school, and her other areas of interest include traditional building practices and sustainable living. Welcome, Kanmani. Many of our participants are usually older, so we are very happy to have a young person like you on board today.
Thank you, ma'am. My privilege.
as part of our endeavor to reach marvelous medicine and beyond medicine across borders, we are happy to have Dr. Hari Paudel, who's a Director and Chief Consultant Interventional Pain Specialist at Pokhara Pain Care Center, Nepal. Hari did his MBBS from Nepal Medical College and MD Anesthesiology from Manipal College of Medical Sciences, Pokhara, Nepal, and a fellowship in interventional pain medicine, Daradia Pain Hospital, Kolkata. Hari has a keen interest in temple architecture and design and is a Rotarian working on projects promoting culture and heritage and historical assets preservation. Welcome, Dr. Hari, and over to you, Professor Arun.
Thank you. Please just confirm if you're able to see my screen in presentation mode.
Not yet. Yeah, now it is. Now
Thank you very much.
Yes, yes.
Can all others mute, please?
Request all participants other than Professor Arun Menon to mute themselves, please.
So very good evening to everybody. The topic that I've chosen to speak on, actually based on suggestion from the organizers of this program, is on conservation of one important living temple in Tamil Nadu. But I put it into the context of the challenges that we face in conserving living temples in a country like India. This work is, of course, something that our center here at IIT Madras, which is called the National Center for Safety of Heritage Structures, worked on for several years and successfully brought it to completion in the recent past. So this work would definitely have not been possible without the effort of all my teammates, two of whom I've named here, Karpagam Balamurugan and Shivangi Shukla, an engineer and conservation architect who worked at our center for a pretty long time. Just to give a context to the specific case of the temple that I'll be dealing with today, we're really dealing with living temples, archaeological temples which have historic importance in South India. These present a certain challenge in terms of carrying out regular civil maintenance works, regular restoration work from time to time, and regular maintenance work from time to time. The context of living temples and the need for conservation is a rather challenging aspect. There are many examples that our center has worked on. Three of them are listed here. One is the fire damage and restoration that was required after the fire damage in Madurai, Meenakshi Sundareshwar Temple. The Veera Vasantarayar Mandapam, a 500-year-old structure, is one such case. The second one is the one that I'm going to be talking about today, which is a project that we took up as a pilot restoration project. And this is a 12th century temple in Kumbakonam called Sri Abat Sahayeshwara Temple in the village of Tukkachi. The third one is also a very interesting project, which is the completion of an incomplete temple Gopuram. And this is in Tiruvellarai, a temple close to Samayapuram. Of these three, as I said, the one that is highlighted in red is what I'm going to be basically talking about. When we look at historical temples, we're really in a context where there are multiple values that these structures present. These values range from historical values to archaeological values. There's architectural value, there is artistic value if there's painting and other tangible art elements, to cultural value and literary associations as well. And these deal with all the tangible elements, but you could also have the intangible knowledge that these temple structures really contain. And these have to do with the rituals, the knowledge system that exists regarding the rituals, regarding the construction systems of such temples, the mythology, the sacred beliefs, and the performing arts. So all this would really encapsulate as the intangible elements of the heritage. This is the context in which we're looking at the restoration of this 12th century temple. In the state of Tamil Nadu, in fact, many of you may be aware, we have thousands of temples. In fact, there's documented 40,000 temples with the listing that the government has, and over 9,000 of these temples are at least 100 years or older, many of them finding references, citations in the Sangam literature as well, close to 2,000, 2,500 years ago. After independence, there was a structure brought to the way these temples are administered. And this has, of course, some roots in the way the British also started looking at a regulatory framework for these temples. So post-independence, we're really looking at the HRNC Act of 1951 and amendments in 1959. You have rules that are framed by the Hindu Religious and Charitable Endowments. And this became a government department in the 1960s. So it basically specifies what is work, civil work with respect to temples, and when it is a part that deals with the ancient construction, so the Gopuram, Vimanam, or any of the stone constructions, or those constructions with lime stucco work. These are historical, the historical fabric of the temple, and do not qualify as regular civil work. And these rules prevent an approach to these parts of a temple in a standard manner that the Public Works Department or the Highways Department would approach. And the rules of the HRNC actually require that you bring in sthapatis who have been trained in the traditional knowledge systems to actually carry out renovations to such structures. It also mandates that you have to bring in an archaeologist because of the historical importance of these structures. You bring in an archaeologist from the Archaeological Survey of India, which is a central government department, whenever repair and renovation of such structures which have archaeological importance are being repaired or renovated. Today, if you look at the regulatory framework, these rules still apply, and some important changes to the policy. I'm referring to the policy note of 2021-22. It has over the years become quite evident that care has to be taken in dealing with these 9,000 odd temples, which are part of our heritage of Tamil Nadu. And therefore, they have to be conserved, they have to be preserved in a manner that is uniform and conscious of the multiple values that they present. And so there is an explicit mandate to work on these without changing the heritage value, and also attempt to prepare a manual that the department can actually be using through the agencies of their staff. And the HRNC actually consults experts from different areas because they might not have in-house expertise on heritage conservation or archaeology or restoration. And this gives them the possibility of taking up scientifically appropriate restoration works. So this Tirupani, which is related to the sacred parts of the temple structure, typically in today's context is temple by temple, which requires this sort of a renovation. A proposal is put up, a proposal based on archaeological, civil, structural, and inputs from the sthapati is developed and then put up at regional committees and state level committees that screen these proposals and then allow what is reasonably acceptable. And such a committee at the state level or the regional level has been constituted by the government. And especially for temples which are more than 100 years old, there's an expert committee which also examines these temples. Just to give you an idea of the numbers, as per the HRNC's jurisdiction, you have about 41,805 temples. And as I said, over 9,000 of them are actually 100 years or older and actually classify as archaeological structures of archaeological importance. But the big challenge with this context is, since a body like the HRNC is actually dealing with management of the temple properties, management of the temple, administration of the temple, the civil work part of the preservation of these temples is quite a challenge for them, and they don't have in-house expertise to be able to carry that out. So there isn't a conservation wing or a renovation wing within such an organization. You have engineers and drafting officers who look at the estimates and approve the estimates, and they also end up supervising these works. They check quantities and they check measurements. And currently, this wing actually has about 226 posts. This has been created in the period prior to 2021. We really did not have so many positions within the HRNC department, and the HRNC department would actually depend on the public works department, the highways department, and the public works department, with engineers on deputation who would come and carry out these activities. So today we have a significant number of positions, which mean that within the department you have the possibility of nurturing these roles from when they join to when they retire, and the department can create a history of how they actually work, instead of getting somebody coming from the public works department for a short period of time, 2 to 3 years, carrying out their work, bringing their experience in working with modern constructions and roads and buildings, and then leave after working in the department, in the HRNC department, for a few years. So that's slowly changing, and which is in the positive direction. Apart from the engineers, you also have a cadre of sthapatis, who really are the ones who carry out the work in these constructions. Still, the HRNC receives engineers on deputation from Public Works Department and Highways Department. The numbers are reducing, but still, given the number of temples, given the number of districts we're talking about, the deputation is still one of the important contributors to the human resource in the HRNC department. So the fact that with this sort of a scenario, people coming in to work on these ancient structures without prior experience has led to a lot of criticism and a lot of inappropriate and unregulated civil works in historical temples. One example is stone reliefs in these temples being cleaned to look bright and new using sandblasting, and this has led to loss of bas relief, loss of inscriptions. In many of these cases, inscriptions even dating almost 1,000 years back. Then a lot of stone masonry construction is repaired with cement. Cement mortar is not a very compatible material with a material like stone or historic bricks, and therefore it starts deterioration processes which can become irreversible. So pointing, as you can see, is really the joint material being refurbished. That's called pointing. With cement, when you do that in stone and ancient bricks, it can be a serious problem. Apart from that, unsympathetic additions like this huge water tank or a syntax tank being introduced within a historical temple space. Of course, you need water supply, but then is this the only way to do it? Is the sort of criticism that they will attract. You can see additions of roof elements, introduction of PVC roofs, introduction of corrugated sheet roofs, sort of changing the entire setting, which is the historical construction setting. In many cases, paintings are carried out, mural paintings are carried out with very little resemblance to what originally existed, both in terms of colors and in terms of features, implying we end up losing these paintings forever. And this is another serious problem in such temples. One of the famous cases where loss of the historical painting due to the new paintings that have been, so refurbishment of the old paintings leading to complete loss of the historic value of these paintings is this example in Tiruvayar temple, almost disfigured because of the sort of intervention carried out. But this is really because of the lack of training and the lack of attention to aspects which are of historical significance. So if this was the context that has prevailed for a significant amount of time, 1960s, the department was started, but then over time, things have not been really moving in the right direction because of all these issues that you've seen. In 2015, there was a writ petition in the Madras High Court that actually raised all these concerns, and the court was asked to deliberate on how should these historical monuments, which are also places of worship, be protected, and that HRNC be restrained from doing renovation work in these temples in the manner it has actually caused damage to so many of these temples. So the court, the High Court of Madras, actually took cognizance of this and basically issued an interim order asking HRNC to stop renovation works in all temples until the court reaches a conclusion on what should be the way forward. But unfortunately, with the volume of temples that you have in Tamil Nadu, 40,000 temples, 9,000 of them ancient temples, the temples represented to the Madras High Court saying you cannot just give a blanket ban on all the civil work that has to carry on, that has to continue in these temples. Some of them have safety issues, structural safety issues. In some of these cases, Kumbhabhishekams are to be conducted, and therefore a blanket ban would actually be quite a problem. The court took cognizance of this and created an interim expert committee and said, we create this committee which is composed of the Sthapati, Agama scholars, Shaiva Agama and Vaishnava Agama, an archaeologist, a conservation expert, a structural engineer, and the HRNC itself present there as the member secretary of this committee. And this committee was asked to basically look at and approve only works that are urgent until the case was, the ruling in the case was arrived at. Only those works that are urgent and emergency or of emergency nature. In the meantime, even UNESCO, as an input to this case in Madras High Court, conducted a fact-finding mission and basically pointed out all the issues related to the previous slides that I was showing you. You can imagine in very large, important temples, that was the state of affairs. Finally, in 2021, a landmark verdict was arrived at. In the meantime, between 2017 and 2021, over 5 years, the interim committee actually examined over 500 representations from temples where civil work had to progress for reasons of emergency and reasons of urgency. And in the process, this committee actually realized that there is really a need to work with the HRNC department, probably through pilot projects, to sort of examine what can be done, what cannot be done, what is the right process to be undertaken, and so on. This landmark verdict came out in 2021, and Honorable Justices R. Mahadevan and Adikeshwalu were the ones who delivered the verdict. They disposed the writ petitions against the HRNC, and they said, look, but HRNC must work within this context in a more systematic manner, and gave several suggestions towards how HRNC's infrastructure and capacity can actually be strengthened. So it's in this context that we actually, so I was part of this interim committee constituted by the court, and given the kind of situation that we were seeing, we wanted to pick up one temple which could be a pilot exercise where we work with HRNC and then demonstrate what should be the approach to conservation in a historically important living temple in the context of Tamil Nadu. So the big challenge is, though there are internationally acceptable principles of how archaeological monuments must be preserved through UNESCO, and several other international organizations, the challenge of living temples, where worship is underway, and worship is the most important activity. But the historicity of the temple cannot be ignored. Is a very challenging context. So in this context, one really needs to understand that it's important to maintain. Continue the main function of the site, and therefore renovations are required, some additions might be required, and so on. However, it also needs to recognize that there are several spiritual and cultural activities in this sort of a setting, and that's been continuing over centuries, and therefore maintaining that is the first and the most important function of these sites. Now, if you look at the classical approach internationally, if you have an archaeological site, an archaeological monument, this may not necessarily be a living monument. No active function or no religious activity in the context of temples might actually be happening in these archaeological sites. So the approach there can be quite different. But in a living temple, that's completely a different situation. So the archaeological interest in a temple is you want to retain the fabric. The fabric has value, the material has value, the tangible aspects have value. It's the architectural heritage, and you must preserve it as archaeological evidence. So if you replace that with new stone, you're actually losing the archaeological value of the site itself. But if you look at it from the other perspective, the continuity of religious and cultural interest in the temple, basically the temple is catering to the spiritual dimension of the people who are involved with the temple, and so you need to cater to the continuance of the spiritual activity in the temple. The temples really are places of faith, and that's why they were built. That's the primary purpose. So, do you adopt the religious and cultural interest as the prime parameter, or do you look at the archaeological interest? This is the in a living temple which has archaeological importance. This is the big conundrum that exists. Does one take precedence of over the other, or which is the one which we must be catering to? So, in contexts such as these, we really have to strike a balance. It is a multi-stakeholder environment, and we have to take a middle path. We cannot erase history, we cannot erase archaeological evidence, but we cannot ignore the religious and cultural sentiments and the requirements of worshippers, requirements of the people who follow the faith in that context. So, if you look at ancient India, the concept of Jeernodharana, renovation of an existing structure, if it is a temple, the sacred space, is something that you can actually see in the ancient texts. And the ancient texts like Mayamatam, Manasara actually talk of a minimalistic approach for repairs and renovations. If there's a crack in a piece of stone, try to fix the crack. If the crack cannot be fixed, replace only that piece of stone. It doesn't say replace the entire wall. So there is a minimalistic approach that is already in place in the ancient tenets that talk about renovation of temples, which means that we can really fall back on what our ancient knowledge system actually talks about. So this renovation also must be looked at as, if there is damage, it must be attended to, and then you are renewing the shell so that the main activity, the spiritual development, can continue. If you look at the modern approach to built heritage conservation, as I said, it comes from archaeological principles and tries to preserve the ancient fabric as much as possible through a concept of minimal intervention. Retain as much as possible. Only in the extreme cases, go and put a new material so that you salvage it completely. So even the modern principles work on minimal intervention, and that's a point of convergence between the ancient knowledge system and the modern approach. When you look at archaeological monuments, again, what is important is the fabric, the original fabric, the physical fabric is what stands for the authenticity and historicity of the place, and that really takes precedence. And therefore, in this context, continuity is important of the activity. Historicity and authenticity of the materials is important. Minimalistic approach is something that both these domains talk about, and therefore there is a possible middle path that can be adopted, and that's really what needs to be emphasized in the context of living temples such as those in Tamil Nadu. And then there are several other aspects that we must keep in mind, that there's an intangible knowledge, the traditional knowledge system in these temples, in their construction and in their functioning, in terms of the Agama Shastras, the Stapatya Veda, the Shilpa Shastras, is also something that is extremely valuable. And unless we consciously preserve that, revisit that, we might lose this intangible knowledge in these spaces. And therefore, roles of persons who are stakeholders, such as the Acharya and the Stapati, in these processes, when we look at renovation of temples, is actually indispensable and must be continued, must be retained as an approach. It therefore becomes clear that from a modern conservation perspective, it is possible to feed into the traditional practices and create a confluence of ideas, confluence of good practices. And in that manner, it's not only the tangible heritage, not only the fabric that we are preserving, but also the intangible cultural heritage, intangible knowledge that we are conserving. And therefore, it must be very clear that we cannot go and completely repair and reconstruct a temple, but you must take a middle path and try and conserve them. We have 40,000 temples, but the details of each of these ancient temples and classification of these ancient temples based on their historical value, archaeological value, architectural value, and cultural value is something that has to be done in a more systematic manner. So listing and grading exercises are really essential, so that the values that these temples stand for are not lost as we renovate them, as we preserve them and conserve them. Consultative processes are essential. As I said, it's a multiple stakeholder environment. You have to work with Agama and Shilpa Shastra experts, the Stapatis, the archaeologists. Stapatis are trained in building construction in ancient manner, in an ancient system. Modern day architects and civil engineers are trained in a different way. You need to bring these together. You have temple administrators, you have devotees, you have donors, you have the local community. All these people have to be brought together. And that's how you can achieve a holistic conservation of the site. And today, there's ever-growing demand from the public and the temple administration to keep expanding these temples and cater more and more to the public. You have to upgrade pilgrim infrastructure, but you also have to ensure that there is safety of the multitudes that visit these temples. And therefore, it's important that master plans are developed in these temples. And one interesting thing that happened after the verdict in 2021 is large temples where conservation work is being taken up, or Kumbhabhishekams are coming up, a detailed master plan development process has begun with the involvement of all these stakeholders that you're talking about. And as I said, the traditional knowledge system is something that we must also preserve in the process. So I think that was a long background, but I've sort of worked in this context for about 15 years now, and I know it is a very complex mosaic to even explain in a few minutes. So you will excuse me if I've dwelt too much on it or given you very superficial idea of this very challenging area in which we have to work. So let me now shift gears and talk about the actual temple that I wanted to introduce you to in terms of work that was recently completed. And this is Soundaryanayagi Ambige and Sri Abatsayeshwarar temple in Tukkachi, which is a village in Kumbakonam. The pictures that you see is one from 2020 and the other from 2023. And mind you, the image on the left was how this temple presented itself for over 6 decades. So it was in ruins for a very long period of time. And the Tamil Nadu government and HRNC department took this up as a pilot exercise and was able to complete it in an almost record time, I would say. Everything came together in a fantastic manner, such that it could be finally reconsecrated and given back to the community. This is, to me, a very good example of convergences between the modern approach and the traditional approaches that is required in these contexts. You need a lot of synergistic exercises that supplement each other, complement each other. Documentation, diagnosis, safety assessment, developing engineering method statements for execution are aspects that we are today trained in a very scientific manner to execute. That really needs to tie up with the traditional knowledge systems, and that's where the convergence is essential and will be successful. What we really did is just before the pandemic, and in fact this was it was in February 2020 that February 2020 that the whole process was formalized, and we proposed a pilot project to the HRNC department. We, in the sense, National Center for Safety of Heritage Structures at IIT Madras, said that we would take up this temple, which is in such a dilapidated condition, but of a size that we can probably handle as a pilot exercise, and look at it from multiple perspectives, bring in experts, bring in the multiple experts that are required, do a detailed documentation, mapping, condition assessment, value assessment, and then propose repairs and work out the specifications for those repairs, and hand it back to the department so that the department can take it forward for execution of these repairs. So that's this entire pilot exercise. This is, as I said, in a village called Tukkachi, and Tukkachi is actually nothing but Durgai Archi. So this Durgai shrine, which was actually constructed within this temple complex, which was a Shiva temple, a prominent Durgai shrine was constructed by the Cholas, and the village actually takes the name of Durga. So the village is known as Durgai Archi, which is what becomes Tukkachi. So it is a shrine that was constructed in the period of Rajendra Chola I and later expanded by Kulothunga Chola and Vikrama Chola. That's the temple, and what you see on the right side is in 2024, September 2024, when this consecration was completed. So it's a pretty large temple, but nice and contained, that one could work on multiple aspects very nicely. What you see here is the state of the temple when we started working on this temple. This is a drone footage from early 2020. You can see that you have compound walls that have collapsed. You have the Durga shrine, which is in bad shape. The second gopuram was intact. The first gopuram had collapsed partially. So it was a very, very, very dilapidated condition. Structural safety compromised in many locations, and that's how we began work on this temple. There's this quick video that will give you an idea of the whole site. You can see the partially collapsed gopuram with the hole at the top. Lot of collapses. This is the Durga shrine. The Durga shrine was at the verge of collapse. The main Mahamandapam in front of the Durga shrine. This is the Mahamandapam in front of the Durga shrine, and that's the main temple complex. Work had actually, this is the partially damaged gopuram. Work had actually begun in 2015, but was never completed, was never taken forward and completed. And therefore, in 2017, when we actually saw the structure, we had the idea of taking it forward as a pilot exercise. So I'll rush through this. The amount of damage that you can see is extensive. In fact, in many parts of this structure, we were not brave enough to enter and do the actual documentation, because the portions were at the verge of collapse. Instead, we actually adopted a remote rapid visual assessment using drones. So there were portions where we actually did not enter, and we just used drones to capture as much as possible. So this was, there's an interesting paper that tries to explain what was the decision model to adopt where we use a drone, where we use photogrammetry, where we access the site, where we cannot access the site. So you can see extremely dilapidated condition of this structure. And this was in 2020, early 2020. And just after we signed the MOU, we had the pandemic, and you can imagine everything had to come to a stop. We signed the pandemic on Shivaratri of 2020, February 2020, and then we had to wait till about June or July to actually be able to access the site because of the curbs in movement. And then we had the luck of being able to work in an unhindered manner. And by 2022, we were able to come up with a complete detailed project report on this temple. And then luckily things fell into place in terms of its renovation. So I'll move forward. Just a few pictures showing you how photogrammetry was used to document. We needed these because although a plan of the temple was available by work done by a Sthapati earlier, elevations and sections were not available, which were required to be able to measure quantities of work that are required in the temple. And therefore, we did photogrammetry based documentation, prepared drawings of each of these temple structures. So you can see the Abhatsahayeshwara shrine, the Shiva's shrine. You can see the plans and sections developed here. The Durga shrine, the Mahamandapam in front of the Durga shrine, different elevations of the Durga shrine, which also required a lot of interventions because of the state it was in. One of the most beautiful Durga shrines that you will see in this part of the country. These are elevations showing the cloister mandapam of the inner prakaram. The prakaram had this special cloister mandapam that ran all along, and then you have the second prakaram wall, the bigger Chola period wall outside. You can see that the gopuram, which is actually a 7-storied gopuram, part of it had collapsed. 4 stories had actually collapsed. And all the debris was on top of this. So even accessing this was so difficult to carry out surveys. So after documentation, you can also see the different names given to different parts of these structures in the traditional knowledge system from the Sthapatya Veda. This was an important exercise where we modern architects and engineers trained in the modern knowledge systems went through a process of unlearning and relearning the way the Sthapatis would work with these structures, and identify different parts of the structure with the names that they are familiar with. And of course, the reconstruction of whatever portions had to be reconstructed had to happen by identifying those portions and replicating them for construction. So different elevations again. And then we did what's called damage mapping. We really needed to understand the kind of damage that has happened in different segments. So once the documentation drawing, the complete damage mapping is done as an overlay. You can see the different types of damage that we're talking about. This was done for different structures, and then we were ready to actually take it to the next stage. So what we attempted here was something very interesting. We had a consultant Sthapati who was part of our team, who helped us understand the basic system which was used in the ancient past to construct temples. And the crux of that is what is called the Ayadi Ganitam, a system called Ayadi Ganitam. And this was where we were trying to integrate and bridge traditional knowledge system and modern conservation principles. So we tried to decipher what is the basis on which the dimensions of the temple are really worked out. So the focus of this part of the research was really the traditional knowledge system of Ayadi Ganitam for the temple. And really it was through dialogue with the Sthapatis that we were able to understand this. So how did we do this? We took the temple as it exists now, and then looked at the measurements of the temple, and then looked at the ancient text that existed, and tried to understand through a process of reverse engineering what would have been the Ayadi, which is basically one number that dictates the dimensioning and the proportioning in the temple. So we applied this reverse engineering process to arrive at the Ayadi number in the Abhatsahayeshwara temple. And this was an interesting exercise because it also informs the conservation process, the modern conservation process, in spaces which are of cultural significance. This was our way of being able to preserve the intangible knowledge, which, unless we really take part in it, are not going to be able to understand and not going to be able to document and preserve for posterity. So, Ayadi Ganitam, just to define Ayadi Ganitam, is a key design element which is there in Vastu Shastra. And this is what Sthapatis would use to plan and construct temples. And the Ayadi formulae, there are several prescriptions, and these are related to astrological parameters, the directional properties of the earth. And eventually, for the site where you're going to build the temple, you arrive at one auspicious number. And this auspicious number becomes the root number for based on which all the dimensions and proportions are arrived at. So this Ayadi number is really believed to, for that particular site, for the presiding deity, for the Karta who's building the temple, and for the devotees, the community, is believed to be the number that will ensure the temple's spirituality and durability, longevity over time. Basically, what is this Ayadi? It is a one unit of a dimension of a temple. It can be a dimension of the plan layout, which then is also used for the elevation and also used for the decorative features. This number will serve as the measurement of the length, the width, the area or the perimeter of the structure, and the sizes of all the rooms, all the elements of the elevation are actually calculated using the ratio and proportion method. So this, in a way, is connecting the built form to the environment around you, to the space around you, the life around you, the universe around you. So it is a way of trying to achieve harmony between the structure that is being constructed and the living beings and the environment around. So after the site is selected through Bhumi Pariksha, and prior to the architectural design, which is called Padavinyasam, the Ayadi formula is worked out. So once this number is arrived at, this number, an odd number is assumed from different considerations, and this odd number is divided by a number, and the remainder is looked at. Now, this remainder will give an idea of the quality of the space, what may be the outcome if you go with that number. And that's how the choice is really made. And this number is linked in a way to the god, the presiding deity, or the Karta, or the Sthapati, or the town, or several aspects. So if you have this number that is usually an odd number that is assumed, it's divided by 8, and you look at the remainder. And the remainder will actually tell you the quality of the possible quality of the outcome. Now, if it is 1 or 2 or 3 up to 8, you have different outcomes. Some of the outcomes are negative, and so those numbers are avoided. Some are positive, and they are picked up, and then that starts becoming the dimension, which is the basic dimension. So this is, once this is arrived at, you need to start relating it. In the past, the measurements also were based on the sizes of the regional grains, and therefore, location to location, these measurements actually varied. So what was referred to as an angulam in one part of Tamil Nadu was different from an angulam in another part of Tamil Nadu. So these differences also have to be kept in mind. It depended on where the temple was situated, and where the construction was situated, and what type of cultivation was happening there, what type of rice grain was growing there, and what is the size of that rice grain. So, there is this linkage between the natural produce of that location in the measurements to the auspicious number that is selected. So in this case, we applied this reverse engineering, and we tried to understand. We took the measurements of the temple, and we said, okay, let us see what might have been the number that the Cholas in the 12th century used for dimensioning this particular temple. And through a process which is difficult to explain within the context of this presentation, we arrived at different numbers, which could possibly be the number that might have been the Ayadi. And then through and there are codified steps to be able to do that. And in this particular case, we use the Shodasha Ayadi. There are 16 calculations that need to be done to arrive at it. There are calculations which are 25 calculations and lesser. Shodasha is what is typically adopted. In the case of Tukkachi, we arrived at the Tanjai Muram, 29 Tanjai Muram as possibly being the Ayadi which has been used for this particular construction, and the attributes of that particular number are also available from these from the ancient texts. So this process was an extremely interesting process for us, because it gives us an insight into the process followed for selection of a site to construction of something that we see as a finished product in front of us, and the amount of linkage between human being and the nature around him and her, up to the final measurement of the fine measurements of the temple. We completed these studies. We handed over the report to the Tamil Nadu government in 2022. In March 2022, we submitted this. There was a delay because of the pandemic. And it was a matter of divine intervention that donors were identified in a very short period of time. A temple that was not in worship for over 60, 65 years. Everything fell into place so beautifully. And in a matter between 2022 summer and 23 late summer, the work was completed. Two sthapatis were working simultaneously. All the money that was required was made available by gracious donors, and the entire temple was completed in a record time of less than 15 months, renovated within 15 months. And what you see on the right is a bird's eye view of the site after the work was completed. So just take a few pictures of before and after. You can see the Durga shrine before restoration, and then you can see the condition after renovation. It's just one of the most beautiful vimanas that you can see in this part of the world. You can see the interior of the temple that was after interior of the Garbhagriha post completion. Two more pictures of the Durga shrine. The Mahamandapam of the Durga shrine. In 15 months to be able to do this quantum of work is mind-boggling, because a huge Mahamandapam like the one that you see here of the Durga shrine was completely dismantled, and this is the dismantled stage, and reconstructed because the plinth had actually become undulated, and we had to rework the foundations to be able to put it back. So the Sthapatis actually, in record time, dismantled, numbered every element, put back as much as possible. Damaged, cracked beams were replaced, cracked columns were replaced, but brought back to its original glory. These are the cloister mandapams in the first prakaram. There were collapses which had to be attended to. This is, for me, the closest picture to my heart, because on 28th November 2017 was when I had the opportunity to visit this temple. It was late evening in November, and I had barely an hour or so, because the sun was setting and the whole place was dark, to go see this place. And this was during the period when the interim committee of the court was actually carrying out its work. And that is when we saw this temple, and we said we should look at this temple as a pilot exercise. Otherwise, history will not forgive us. We picked it up, and it's really divine grace and hard work of so many people that in a matter of about 7 years, the temple has been completely restored and returned to the community. And today it's bustling with people. It's such an attraction for people of the village, and not only the village. This is the day of consecration. This is 3rd September 2023. It's almost 1.5 years since that wonderful day. The temple was flooded with people from Tukkachi village. Over 65 years, if you really imagine, there's a disconnect that comes between a dilapidated structure and a village. 65 years is several generations. Youngsters in the village, middle-aged people in the village really did not have a connect with the temple at all, and they would just ignore it. But the elderly would always remember those beautiful days that they spent in this temple. And we were very concerned about the disconnect that existed between the community and the temple. But on September 3rd, 2023, we saw that the village came forward and re-adopted its temple. And too much of time had passed between when it fell into a dilapidated condition to when it finally got restored. These are the final pictures, and I'm just closing. And the beautiful closure to the story was our team at IIT Madras, the girls whom I had mentioned in my first slide. They were so keen that this is such a beautiful project that we must submit this to the UNESCO, which calls for nominations for the Asia Pacific Award annually. And they did all the work. They just put together all the documents. They took permissions from HRNC. They took permissions from all the people who actually carried out the work, these tapatis, the trust that even carried out the work, all the other experts, and then made the submission. And this was given the award of distinction, which is the second highest award that is given to submissions. And there were almost 40 submissions in 2024. The award of distinction is given for some project which has regional impact. The topmost award is given for a project which has an international impact. In this case, of course, given the context, it is a regional impact that this project has. And we were blessed to even get this recognition because much more than what this recognition gives us had gone into the effort itself. And this is the team. HRNC's wholehearted support in all the stages is something that is very unique in this particular project. It was the Stirnavakarsar Arakattale Trust that actually carried out the work, appointed the Sthapatis, did the management, found the donors, got the funds, and executed it in 15 months. We were we call the engineering and the architects team that put together the project report, the estimates, and put it to the department. So we were all our staff and all the experts. The Sthapati that was a consultant to us, epigraphist as an expert, archaeological experts. We had the Agama expert, Agama Shastra expert. We had a sociologist working with us from IIT Jodhpur, and also a local community representative who was also an employee, a past employee of HRNC, an octogenarian, Mr. V. Vaidyanathan, was the happiest person at the end of this process to see that a temple that he had seen as a young boy came back to its full glory in his mid 80s. And of course, the two contractors, the two Sthapatis who made this a reality, are also nominated in this award. I'll stop here. Probably taken more time than I'm permitted to. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Arun Menon. Over to you, Dr. Shivaram.
Professor Menon, I am actually. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you turn your camera on, Dr. Shivaram?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. I'm normally not someone who wants for words, but I'm actually quite speechless. So this is, if there was any such thing that we could do as a standing ovation in a Zoom meeting, then please consider this as a standing ovation. It is a masterly exposition of what a problem is, how does one look at it, how does one break it down into component parts, and how do you approach it systematically, methodically, and then offer step by step solution and then implement it. Kudos to you and the team and the whole lot of it. And it is a fabulous story. And I think this will sort of serve as a benchmark. When I was reading through the citation, I think some members of your team, maybe you, I talked to our group at the Tamil Paramparaya Arakattalai last year about this and as part of it. And I think this is going to serve as a benchmark, not just for Kumbakonam or Chola Temple or South India, but for a lot of such heritage structures all around the world. In fact, day after tomorrow, one of my colleagues is talking on how they recovered the Abu Simbel temple, the 3,000-year-old temple in Egypt in our monthly meeting. And it's fantastic. We have few questions, if I can quickly
Please.
ask from the chat group. Yeah, I'll go one by one. Somebody first wanted to know, for example, how do you do the electric wiring? Obviously, one of the key things that happens is the wiring and the electrical wiring, which is one completely new addition and something which we cannot do without, right? So somebody wanted to know, how does one even go about the whole thing? Can we just answer one by one and then?
Yes. So, wiring and even air conditioning today is coming into temple spaces, because, the Garbhagriha can become really a warm place for the pujaris to work. So this can be done in a manner that is concealed as much as possible. Of course, not drilling through and putting these wires into the temple structure, but concealing them from plain sight, and using materials which are don't stand out too much with respect to the sculpted stone and so on. And I'll tell you, in this particular temple, already there was some amount of wiring and some there's not much of new interventions which have been carried out. But I would suggest, if you look at the Srirangam temple, Srirangam Ranganatha Swami temple, the lighting that has been done there is really extraordinary. It is done in a very tasteful manner, therefore taking care of the functional requirement, but ensuring that the beauty of the architectural elements and the historicity of the ancient construction is not negatively impacted in any way. So designers will be able to do this, and you, if you're bringing this into temples, you must demand of the professionals that they do it in this manner. The Srirangam temple is an excellent example. The Kamakshi Amman temple in Kanchipuram is another example where recent conservation work has taken care of these new elements of design in a very, very tasteful and appropriate manner, I would say.
The next question is something from me.
Yes.
Having visited a whole lot of temples and looked at some of the efforts at awe and some of them with dismay, I'm kind of, broadly speaking, there is what I would call a reversible damage and something called irreversible damage, right? So if you put wire or if you put a duct, tomorrow it can be replaced or removed when something else is better. But if you sandblast an inscription out, you can't bring it back. Or if you overpaint a mural like we have seen in some of the Kanchipuram temples and so on. Yeah, Thiruvayur. Even I recently had seen even Kailasnathar, some of this thing is taken over. So my question is this. So you talked about the 75 odd suggestions from the court and so on, and then you had your own documentation process. So is there something that a blueprint which keeps modifying with every such work that you do? For example, when you do the next temple next to the Apatsaha, would you be kind of constantly modifying and altering and then adding to this what we call SOP?
Which is very, very true, because it is only based on experience that some standardized documents can even be developed. But I will tell you, the most valuable experience has been being a part of that interim committee between 2017 and 2021, and sitting through 2016 and 2021, and sitting through presentations from 500 odd temples that required interventions. So for each of these temples, we would go into the specifics of what they require, what was their proposal, why something is acceptable, why something is not acceptable, and each and everything was minuted. So we are talking of 50 to 55 sittings of the committee, each lasting about 8 hours, and volumes that we have been writing in terms of the minutes, and that's given, I would say, 5 to 10 pages of what we can do, what we should not do. And that's the bare basic content on which I think these pilot exercises help us develop more robust methods. And I think we keep learning as we go.
Somebody mentioned the word mind-boggling. It's much more than mind-boggling. because as you rightly pointed out, it is not just the multi-dimensional damage, structural, vegetation growing, stones falling down, disappearing, floor, adhishtanam not being there, not being able to support, and so on. Vidya, if I can just maybe allowed to quickly share my screen.
Yes, sir. After that, maybe you could get Kanmani and Hari.
Yes, I was going to do that. I was just going to do that. Just show. Recently, I was in Central India and in the Bhateshwara group, and this is is my screen shown?
No, sir, not yet.
How do I share it?
You're not seeing the share thing on the bottom of your screen?
Yeah, I am.
Radhakrishna,
Yes.
Yes.
Now it is showing.
Yeah, very quickly. It won't take more than a second. So, yeah. So this is a group of temples called Bhateshwara at Morena district in Madhya Pradesh. This is the kind of a state of those temples, which was there when the group of the people from Archaeological Survey of India wanted to rebuild it, because let's not go into the reasons. That is the state of the temple. And from there, painfully, step by step, they had come to this. And this is what it looks like now, today, last month. And this is the thing that we are talking about. Yeah, I'm going to stop sharing now. This is what Professor Menon was talking about. Step by step, little by little, each thing is a challenge, altogether a challenge, and it's fascinating. Sorry for taking so much time of mine. Dr. Kanmani, do you like to say something?
Yes, thank you, sir, for this beautiful presentation. It was enriching and very, very, very informative. I just had a few questions to ask. You had shown us the stone masonry wall with cement pointing, I think in the earlier of your slides. It's like a negotiation between traditional craftsmanship and modern day restoration techniques. Where are the other places where you face this kind of a negotiation in a temple conservation project, especially because we are working with hundreds of years, structures that were built hundreds of years back, and we are restoring them now, currently.
Yeah, so the problem of pointing with the wrong material, which is cement in a context like ancient brick and ancient stone, is irreversible. Because if you try to take off the cement, you end up damaging the stone, and in many cases, you won't believe it, the pointing in cement has been done on walls which have inscriptions. So when you take off the cement, you actually chip off the inscription, and it's gone forever. So I would say there's no negotiation at all. In fact, there are government orders that say that you cannot use cement in this context. But cement is cheaper compared to lime, and those practical considerations dictate the contractors, tapatis, ending up using cement. So it's really non-negotiable. They shouldn't be doing it because it has irreversible damage. The other place where this sort of a negotiation is essential is in archaeologically important living temples. In order to conserve them, one of the paths that Sthapatis, the traditional builder, might want to take is complete dismantling and reconstruction. And they are completely capable of doing it in a very systematic manner without losing a single piece of stone. But then what happens is, in stone, it is easy to dismantle because the mortars are lime, and then you can separate and put them back. But then when you have a brick structure sitting on top of that, and typically the Vimana will have lower kalkaram and brickwork on top, and the Gopuram will have a lower kalkaram in stone and a brickwork structure on top. When you dismantle the stone, you can put the same stone back with lime mortar after resetting and after repairing. But with the brick, you'll end up completely damaging it. You may not even be able to reuse the bricks. And therefore, this big discussion is between whether in situ conservation, can you do some in situ repairs without dismantling and bringing down the whole thing, or is complete dismantling required? And this dialogue goes on. In fact, in the case of the Abhatsayeshwara temple, the Sthapatis first approach for the Durga shrine was that it has to be dismantled for the amount of damage it had. But then we looked at it from our perspective, and the dialogue between us went on for a long time, that we said, you do in situ conservation. If you bring it down, it's going to lose its historicity completely. The brick structure will lose its historicity. So this is the other aspect where there's a lot of back and forth. And I would say there is negotiation here. If it's a truly archaeological, purely archaeological site, that Mahamandapam in front, in an archaeological site, very rarely they would have said allowed it to be dismantled. But there we said, okay, go ahead with the dismantling there because it's a full stone structure. Whereas the Vimana of the Durga shrine, we were very clear it did not warrant complete dismantling. So this is an interesting, professionals trained in completely different methods are discussing on the same aspect, which is preserving the structure. So this is a very interesting area, and I think many more examples will come up as we move forward.
So Dr. Shivaram, it's almost like managing a polytrauma patient with various people with various priorities and compulsions, and eventually somebody has to, some negotiation has to happen to finally
put it all together.
Yeah.
Professor Menon, one interesting question somebody else also asked here about painting. We know that in earlier days when they built it, virtually everything was painted, of course. Particularly for the Sudha, it was painted. Now also you're painting, but then the kind of paint that are used, the kind of colors that are used are quite different, right? The vegetable paint, and except for a few exceptions. But today we see like last week, I had taken a group of friends on a kind of a dozen visit, and the first question they asked me was, why do we have all these kind of horrible colors on these? And I wasn't quite able to explain. Can you throw some light on that?
No, so this is all the 500 temples that we looked at. This was a point of major discussion. The temple would come and say Panchavarnam, that they would like to paint the Vimanas in Panchavarnam. Only the Vimanas are painted. The Vimanas and the Gopurams are painted in Panchavarnam. And to me, it was revealing that Panchavarnam doesn't mean 5 colors. 5 basic colors are mixed to bring out thousands of colors. So it's Panchavarnam versus Ekavarnam. And so the archaeological approach, the archaeologist on our panel would always say, Panchavarnam, nothing doing, you will do only Ekavarnam and just paint it white. Use lime, just lime wash and paint it white. But then, the aspiration of the community is to see something resplendent with all these colors, and that's very much part of our culture. Having colorful flowers as offerings to the god. So making it bland white is something that is not acceptable in many communities, and therefore, again, I think we need to strike a balance. Today, you have multiple colors, but we insist that it has to be water-based emulsions because you're doing this on lime, and lime needs to breathe, and so you can't use enamel paints, and use tone down as much as possible to shades of those 5 Panchavarnams that you want to use. This is again a difficult dialogue, but one must also see why multiple colors are required. So, yeah.
Fascinating and dynamic.
So, Dr. Hari, any experience of yours with similar work in Nepal?
I'd like to thank Dr. Arun sir for the wonderful presentation, and it was wonderful. I mean, looking at the work that your team has been doing for the restoration, it was just mesmerizing. I was wondering like how all those ancient things, and they could be revived in such a way that you see them more beautiful, and the work that you guys have put on it, all the effort must be like behind the scenes. I just could imagine, but the real thing that you have done is very commendable. Wonderful job, sir. Thank you so much. Hats up to the team. And now I'm from Nepal, so I hope all of you are familiar with Nepal. And so Nepal is a very, traditional cultural thing. And I am actually born and brought up in Kathmandu. So Kathmandu itself is a very historical place with, is a city of temple, actually, and within Kathmandu, we have seven UNESCO heritage site, like the Bhaktapur Darbar Square, Bodhanath Temple, Changu Narayan Temple. There is a Kathmandu Darbar Square, Pashupatinath Temple, of course, Swambhunath. So, like, there are a lot of temples, and the architects are quite different from that we see in South Indian modalities, and most of them are in pagoda style. And then what happened was, in 2015, we encountered a very massive earthquake. And after that, a lot of structures, they were demolished by the earthquake itself. And a lot of temples, they were destroyed. And basically, as we all know, that the Kathmandu itself is such a place that it lies in a earthquake belt. So the continuous movement of the Indian and the Tibetan plate always puts our this heritage places and the temples on risk. And we could see that the restoration work being done, but the way that you have been doing, so you must be keeping eye on the things that's going on in Nepal as well. So being an expert on that, so my concern is, like, most of the architectural designs that we have in Nepal, the arts beyond imagination, on especially on the wooden work. And what could be, the challenges, and the way the wooden architectures hundreds of years ago can be preserved and restored, and in place where there is a risk of continuous earthquake. So what could be the measures, that can be implemented in this kind of area, so that the even after restoration, the risk of damage in coming days with earthquake can be prevented. That I always think, if there must be something which is beyond my knowledge, so that would be a very good insight for people like me to know how those things can be prevented or preserved even after restoration.
Thank you, Dr. Powell, for that interesting question. In fact, it's something very close to my heart. 2015, in the earthquake that happened, 10 days after the earthquake, our team, on behalf of Government of India, was in Kathmandu. And in fact, we were in Kathmandu Darbar Square, but we were in Bhaktapur when the second earthquake actually struck, almost 10 days later. And we've had the fortune of being able to work there on behalf of UNESCO, on behalf of ECROM, another organization, in the post-earthquake period. Did a lot of surveys, a lot of learning from the kind of damage that happened there in these historical monuments. And the most recent experience I've had is Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage, INTAC, has restored about 10 monuments in Kathmandu, as a part of a bilateral agreement between Government of India and Government of Nepal. And I had the rare opportunity of peer reviewing those 10 projects, and in 2023, November and December, I was there looking at these projects. Now, as you said, earthquakes is the biggest challenge there. In fact, in the 2015 earthquake, 800 out of 1,700 monuments were actually damaged very badly, which is a very large number for a country that also depends on this for tourism purposes internationally. And being in a seismically actively earthquake prone zone, one important aspect is many of these constructions over time have incorporated a lot of timber in them along with masonry. So masonry alone is very vulnerable to earthquake shaking, but the introduction of timber bands horizontally and vertical elements, and these elements actually supporting the entire timber roof structure, is an important feature that really provides earthquake resistance to these structures. So there are some very interesting examples of how the right kind of restoration of the timber elements has led to the survival of the monument in the earthquake. So Patan Darbar Square, which goes through a more systematic renewal of the structures, renovation and repair of these structures, actually those portions of the monuments survived, whereas portions where the timber had rotten, timber had not been replaced in time, actually were the ones that collapsed. So the criticality of something like timber, which is actually holding a very fragile material like brick together in an earthquake-prone zone, is such a fundamental component of the restoration work. And that even understanding the intricacy of the timber and the masonry, and then trying to restore it in the right manner is something that is very critical. And what is very paradoxical is in the Himalayan belt, which is earthquake prone, in the recent years, because of environmental laws, forest protection laws, availability of timber is greatly affected. And unfortunately, the repercussion is in constructions like this, lesser and lesser timber is available for repairs. And so the old timber, which is deteriorated, is almost forgotten, with the effect that in an earthquake, they tend to perform badly. So this, these are very difficult challenges which have to be overcome. But the great part is that a place like Nepal has the traditional knowledge, the skill required to construct these in the same manner as they used to be constructed even 1,000 years ago, and that needs to be preserved, because that is the intangible part of the heritage of a place, very much like in our area. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the wonderful insight. And so it was wonderful. So arts and architectures are always beyond, faith, belief, and everything. The culture, tradition, and the art itself is the most fundamental, spirituality that any human kind can contain. So it's a soulful thing. And so the work that you all are doing as a team is not only the preservation of the monuments, temples, it's a preservation of the civilization, the entire human race, and the spirituality and the soul itself. So thank you so much for the wonderful job. It's like highly commendable, and it was wonderful to get interacted with you, and you having so much knowledge as per your professional, and beyond that, the support that your team is providing for the reconstruction of the earthquake, as well as the rehabilitation of the structures that were damaged in Nepal as well. But thank you so much for all the support, and hopefully all of you here could come to Nepal and see the ancient temples, the timber made structures. As per the sir said, we could imagine how tactful it was in those ancient times building those structures. And hopefully, because of the effort of the team like Arun Menon sir, so we could even preserve it for the next many more generations to come and admire it. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Hari. Dr. Menon, there is a question about how much did this project cost? I mean, because for it to be sustainable, that would be a...
Yes. So this is not a number that I've constantly engaged with, so it doesn't stay. But I think it was of the order of 2 to 3 crores, because the size of the temple was large, and there was a lot of stonework that had to be done, and a lot of lime mortar work. So I think it was of the order between somewhere between 2 and 4 crores is
that
what
seems
this
too
must
low.
have.
That seems very low.
Yeah, I may be wrong. I may be wrong, because it's something that after we did the specifications and the quantity estimates, it just goes to the department, and then the department takes over from there, mobilizing the donor, and so it should be of that order. But maybe because 2 stapatis were working simultaneously, number of months that they were required to work also is lesser. So mobilization, simultaneous mobilization could have reduced the cost to an extent.
Yeah. Those of you who don't know, sorry, Vidya. So in terms of what Dr. Patta was saying about preservation and conservation, and then of the traditional knowledge systems, I'd just like to point out that Dr. Menon is also an expert on what we call IKS, the He has given lectures and on Indian knowledge systems, reservations, and they're all available, and you can actually look at it on the net.
Thank you.
There was another question from Ravi Shankar about how temple conservation renovation compares with renovations like the Notre Dame, or is something common, or is it completely different? That's the question from Ravi Shankar.
No, I see. I would think there may be slight differences in scales. Notre Dame was under the there's a lot of news on Notre Dame, and so under the international glare, and commendable job in about 6 years they have managed to carry out the entire work and open up the site. It requires a lot of resources, human resources and material resources. Sometimes the state comes in to fund. In the case of Notre Dame, it was such a prestigious thing for the country of France that the government funded it. But in the case of, I'll tell you, in the case of Madurai Meenakshi Sundareshwar Temple, where the Veera Vasantaraya Mandapam was damaged in a fire in 2018 February. We have been working on that, and it's come to a stage where the material is ready, the donors are available, the stone is going to be harvested, but it's such a huge structure that it's going to take so many sthapatis working over a significant amount of time to replicate something of that scale. So yes, time and resources, I think comparable extent of time and resources are required with reference to Notre Dame. But today we have the resources. We actually have the traditional skill, and I think that we must value and preserve as we are doing this restoration work.
Dr. Ravi Shankar, Venkatesh Natarajan, you had a comment about the Talapuranam of the temple. Would you like to share that?
No, ma'am. I was just talking about this beautiful talk, and as I was listening, my grandmother just walked in. I just asked her, "Have you heard of this temple?" And she started scolding me for not knowing about the temple. And then she started telling me about the Sthala of the Koil and about the Sthala Vriksham, about the story of the Padri Pookal, or the flower which is supposed to kind of give enlightenment, emancipation from a curse. So it was all interesting, and regarding the color of the temple, sir, I mean the resplendent colors, for some reason or the other, it doesn't give me that kind of connect, and I draw extensively temple architecture. That is my passion, and most of the time I prefer to use the Payne's gray, and it's very difficult to actually reproduce the blackness of those stones. It's not very easy. They are not just simply black. The shades of gray, the tone, extremely difficult. And that's all I think. I don't want an excellent talk, sir. I think we have learned a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So Akila has a question, though this session is on temple conservation. She wanted Dr. Arun Menon's views on conservation of Jallianwala Bagh, because there were mixed sentiments across the country after the project was completed.
Yes, I don't know. I'm politically wrong. Say something politically wrong. There are mixed opinions about the conservation. I mean, the beautification of that site. That's a challenging example. It is meant to be a poignant reminder of what happened there. In many newspaper articles, you would have heard of Disneyfication of Jallianwala Bagh. I tend to subscribe to that opinion, because it's something that has happened to our people, and it is a stark reminder of one man's folly, who was trying to stand for the empire, and so it is important that the designer's approach to creating additional value to these spaces, narrating the history of these spaces, is done in a very, very subtle, very, very careful and sympathetic manner. I take two examples. One is there's a Holocaust memorial in Berlin, which is an open air memorial. You feel oppressive when you walk through that memorial, and that's what the designer really tried to make you feel. That's what the people who suffered the Holocaust were feeling. You go to Hiroshima and you look at the museum of the commemoration of what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Is again a very poignant moment in Japan's history, the world history. But the way the museum is presented, the way the design is conveying an emotion from grief to hope is beautiful. So I think there is a very important design component here, and the designer must get it right. If the designer doesn't get it right, it can become a matter of folly and discussion. So it's an opportunity, and I think the right people come and do it. We should be able to get some very important pointers, very important memorials of our history. I think it's very important.
That is such an insightful. That's such an insightful point of view. One of my colleagues had a question, Dr. Menon, and I just add my own to it. Is how can you ask how were you actually identified to be part of the project? Dr. Vidya wanted to know. And the second part of the question is, do you collaborate with others, like say the Japanese team in Angkor Wat and around the world? So two-part question.
Yeah, so as I said, I mean, my journey at IIT Madras began in 2010, and I really came in here because the institute and the department had an intent to formalize research and research R&D in the subject of historical structures at IIT Madras. And so I had the great fortune of being able to be a part of a team that was which received a grant from the Government of India, Ministry of Education, to set up what we call National Center for Safety of Heritage Structures. And for the last 13 years, we've actually been working with several government departments on projects like this, on research projects. We have students who do their PhD on temple structures, on historical structures, on challenging problems in these contexts. So it's in that context that, being in Tamil Nadu, the HRNC approaches IITs quite often, and it's we've seen several examples, and then the opportunity of being in the interim court committee, and then during the different visits, I happened to see this temple, and then we thought a pilot project is essential, and that is how we put up a proposal to the department saying, let's do a pilot project. And that is how the project for the restoration of this 12th century Abad Sahayeshwarar temple, and it is really Abad Sahayeshwarar. Shiva is referred to as Abad Sahayeshwarar because the Chola king is suffering from vitiligo, and then in his prayer, Shiva appears and asks him to drink from a stream that's at this particular location, and then to honor the king, he builds a temple there, and that is Abad Sahayeshwarar. So that's how that's how our involvement in this project came about. Internationally, yes, we do a lot of work in Asia. We work in Angkor Wat. Angkor Wat has other temples. There are about 9 other temples, and one of them is called the Taprom Temple. Taprom Temple, this was before I joined IIT, and towards the initial part of my when I joined here, I also worked on that project. The Taprom Temple restoration project was very unique. Government of India, Archaeological Survey of India was restoring that temple in Cambodia, And IIT Madras was the structural consultant to Government of India, to Archaeological Survey of India for a period of 10 years, from 2004 to 2014. The unique challenge there was UNESCO wanted the trees also to be preserved along with the temples. Whereas in the rest of the 8 temples, they said, remove the trees and keep only the temple. In one site, we will preserve both. And that was a challenge Archaeological Survey of India worked on. We work extensively in Myanmar, in a place called Bagan, which is again a World Heritage Site. We just concluded a 5-year project from 2019 to 2024 in doing, it's an earthquake prone zone. So we've been working there quite extensively. We have worked in Laos in a Shiva temple called Wat Phu in Laos. We worked in Nepal after the earthquake. We do some work in Bhutan. We have also worked in Philippines on a church, which is a very unique steel church, one of the few surviving full steel churches in the world. The whole church is made out of steel from the 18th century. So yes, this is our engagement beyond our own country.
Wonderful, wonderful. I saw that in Angkor Wat in Taprong. Soon after your project was over, I was there. I actually saw that.
Wonderful.
Radhakrishna, we are almost out of time. You want to say something?
A great talk indeed. I guess something very novel and very thought-provoking. I have a few comments and a couple of questions, so you'll give me time for that. First of all, I had a very poor opinion of HRC in Tamil Nadu. First time I thought they're doing something which is interesting, because all I knew is that somebody will come take the money from the Hopi, and a lot of it goes missing. This is a very, very interesting thing. Second interesting point is IIT seems to liaise with people from all walks of life. I mean, you're ready to, go with anyone, and this is quite interesting. And this is a very, very interesting aspect. I never thought IIT will go into temple heritage conservation. That, not really imaginable. I'll be very happy if some of us are allowed to even carry the debris or something like that. With all we can do next time you do anything of this nature. Now, there are a couple of technical things. Me, Vidya, and a couple of others have visited so many temples around Chennai and found that the Moola Vigraham is missing in many of them. Like, was there that problem in the temple because then the whole, the philosophy will be dented, because they have to get a new a statue and consecrate it. That wasn't the problem, right?
No, in this temple, there was a Balalayam, a small temple that was created outside, and all the Moola Vigrahams were kept there, and worship was happening in the Balalayam. And so, since it was a village, and the village was really protective of this temple, it was really that sort of a scenario was not there.
See, how was it that the Moola Vigram is not stolen? Because, it's dilapidated. Anybody will walk in, goats will jump in, jump out, and all that. We have seen that many of these statues, important statues, stolen. That you have to sort of, the stealing of statues is a very, very major issue. Now, I was wondering how, rock cut temples could be renovated, because, these are all excavated from a stone, and then of course there are so many temples with broken arms, broken noses, and all that. I'd be interested in knowing what techniques do you use to do that. Then as you were mentioning somewhere, transplantation of temples have taken place in India, especially in low-lying areas. And there's a very interesting point. You said that the stone part we can transplant, the other part we cannot. I mean, that's it. Maybe in those places, most of it is stone, and that's a very big thing. But actually, the percentage of temples requiring revival are a lot more than the temples which are in good shape now, as what we feel when we go around. Now, the word about color. See, I think distinct difference between North Indian and South Indian architecture is color. If you see the Mulavigraham in Northern India is all bright and colorful. See Krishna or Ganesha. When you come to South India, the statues and the walls are sooty, oily and blackish and all that. If you don't see that, you don't feel. No, because if you see most of the statues on South Indian temples, their BMI is more than normal. Let's see, and when they're painted in pink, which is not a human color actually. It's very, very strange, but it's okay as long as it is the gopurams, which is far away. But when come to walls, that take away the whole thing. I think that's interesting. Did you use AI in your work? And if you used AI, what was the usage?
No, no. We depended a lot only on human intelligence. I mean, there are interesting projects that we're working on where AI can actually help. For example, in broken artifacts, matching and using machine learning to do the matching of broken surfaces. That's something that is feasible. But in the projects that we worked on, there wasn't anything beyond using technology for digital documentation actually. 3D laser scanning and then creating cloud points and so on. So we did use heavy computer systems, but not AI. But there are some projects within which this sort of a thing can also be applied.
Now, see, you seem to be working across the world, and I presume that it's a very lucrative job what you do. Base one, two is the thing is in any construction under government there'll be tenders, and the chap who for a lesser tender in these areas, how will it work? Because you can't go that way, and there are people who will make money out of spending here also.
No, says as IIT, we do not get involved in the execution phase. Our mandate is very clear. We actually participate only in the preparatory phases for so the detailed project report, preparing the specifications, estimates, and then handing it over to the government. And the government will follow a tendering
But
process.
it'll be there at the site to see that your ideas come take shape.
Exactly. So then again, there would be as a third party, you would come back to ensure that the execution is as per the original plans. So we do participate in the execution phase, but more as a third party check rather than the executor itself. And in many of these cases, these works are being carried out by donors, and so you don't have to go the tendering route. The donor might have other means of getting people on board. So L1 typically does not operate in this space. Yeah.
And how much did the whole process add to your spirituality personally?
That's a very, very difficult question, but I think it is personal spirituality that has drawn me to this area, and every day is a discovery. There are new things that you learn. It really opens up your mind, and across religions we get to work in these sites, and you really see that after all, human beings think alike, manifest differently, but think alike. The problems are the same all over. It's a big learning exercise. It's a big learning experience.
Wonderful, Dr. Arun. And whenever we see a broken temple, we'll think of you definitely. Really, really impressive. Back to you, Vidya.
Yeah. So, your closing comments, Kanmani.
Thank you, sir. We are all just very lucky and grateful to have, gotten a complete inside view of the restoration process of the Abhadsayashvara temple. Because there is also very little information out there about this particular restoration process. And thank you, Dr. Vidya, Dr. Hari, Dr. Shivaram for putting this together and bringing in an expert like Dr. Arun Menon, who has extensive experience in structural conservation and restoration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Hari, if you're still there, any closing comments?
Ma'am, it was wonderful to be a part of this session, and especially I'm very thankful to Dr. Arun Menon for such a wonderful presentation. Thank you, sir, and thank you, everybody. So it was wonderful being a part of this session. Thank you so much.
Anything more you'd like to share, Dr. Shivram?
No, this we already well short of time. So lovely, and it was great. Hopefully, we listen to you in other forums as well, Professor Menon.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
We come to you last, Dr. Arun, if you want something like a take-home message about this whole process.
No, first of all, I'm very grateful to all of you.
How can we doctors contribute to this?
No, the way I see it is today we see a lot of new temples also being constructed all over, and I keep telling people who come with new designs and say we want to build a new temple, and say we have so many old temples that we have to preserve. There are, as you said, more temples that need preservation than temples that are actually fully functional and in good condition. So I think as a society, we can really step up and adopt these temples and adopt these spaces. And it is not a one-time investment. It really needs maintenance, like the human body. Over time, it needs systems in place. So there's lots we can do as a developing country, as a country that is progressing so fast, so much. Let's not leave our history behind. There's so much awareness of these citizens can do a lot in preserving the history. And I think that's where all of us have a role to play in this context. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Who would have thought that, within quotes, a dry topic like restoration will have so many people logged in right up to the end with such an interactive session. So thank you, audience, for logging in and keeping the whole session interactive with so many questions and comments. We'll meet again next week with another episode of Marvelous Medicine. Till then, take care and stay safe. Good night.